Welcome to the Studio Talk podcast. I'm Xiomara Sosa, your co-host. Every week, we speak to our community members to teach them about mental health through education and awareness, and our hope is to inspire them through social change advocacy. We also interview community members and other mental health professionals, clinicians, healers, students, and wellness professionals. Our style is storytelling. Everyone has a mental health story to tell. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for seeking help from a licensed mental health professional and is not a substitute for psychological diagnosis or treatment. It's purely educational and purely social change advocacy. If you find yourself in any sort of mental health emergency or distress, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Studio Talk Podcast. We are back to sort of check in. It's been a while since we've done a recording, so this is episode number 24, and it's entitled, Where Have We Been? Life Transitions and Your Mental Health. And this is a little bit of a personal take that we're going to take on this because where have I been, really, is the real question, and what life transitions are we talking about? And I do want to touch a little bit on the mental health aspects of it, because as you know, this is a podcast where we have real conversations about issues related to mental health and trying to kind of break those stereotypes and misinformation about what mental health really is and you know, what we're supposed to be talking about. It just seems like the media only ever talks about it when there's some major ass tragedy going on out there. And the truth is that the majority of us go through regular, everyday kinds of things that require us to really deal with mental health issues. None of us escape that. We all have times when we really need to deal with things that affect our mental health. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I want to welcome everybody back. We're hoping to start recording moving forward on a weekly basis and uploading every week different conversations about different things that come up. But we are going to start today with what's been going on with me in particular. And then I do have Lisa here, my co-host, and I do have J-Rock
Hey.
here, and he does all of our technical supervision. And they're here to sort of chime in and check in too when we get further down in our little discussion. So there's that. So today we're going to have a candid conversation really about some serious life transitions and heartaches, grief that I've been experiencing in 2023. It's been pretty hard on myself and my family, my nibblings in particular. So I do want to honor what we've been going through and still be respectful of our privacy. So I will let you know, I'm not going to give a whole lot of details, but I'm going to give enough details where I feel I'm transparent enough and you know, not talking out of both sides of my mouth. Here's what's happening, you know, and this is where we're at with that. And this is why there's a break in the podcast recording. So how it impacts us is sort of the focus that I want to keep on this, not the juicy details or the gossipy part of it, okay? So I just want to make that clear. Like I said, a lot of these things impact our mental health and how very normal, everyday things affect us. None of us are exempt. So for me, for example, back in August, September, myself and my father, who lived with me and I was providing primary caregiving for, he and I both tested positive for COVID. And, you know, it was not an easy thing for us. He was 88 and I, you know, was in pretty good health, but it really was a hard case of COVID that I had, and I was taking care of him at the same time that I needed to do my own healing and recovery with it and my own medication. So, you know, I had to deal with that. Luckily, I have my nibblings who live in the main house where in the property that I'm on, and they were there to sort of help me out because I needed help in taking care of my father and myself. So the VA did a really good job with medications and with support and all of that. And, you know, eventually I got better. My dad got hospitalized and he started to improve, but they really couldn't release him because he started going bad again, back and forth. Long story short, we had to put him in hospice, not directly related to COVID, but really they just found out that he had, you know, acute leukemia. And then, you know, even in fixing the COVID, we had that to deal with. So we brought him home. We wanted to do, you know, his hospice care there as we promised as a family, and we got it all set up and ready. He came home. He was in a good state. Everything, all his medication was there, and that night, the very first night he was there, he passed away. Very heartbreaking for me, very heartbreaking for all of us. And also, we weren't expecting that necessarily. We thought we had a little bit more hospice time with him. So that was one of the reasons why I've had to deal with that. Dealing with end-of-life care for my father, who passed away in September, was very jolting for me for many, many reasons. Basically, like my older brother said, it was the end of my watch, and I've been doing it for 22 years. So that took a particular toll on me. It changed everything up in me, and it really closed a circle on both my parents are now gone, and then the trauma of watching him take his last breath and giving him his medication before he did. All of that were things that I needed to process and deal with. The grief, the trauma, and all of that. Then, it's no secret, and it's public information right now that we, unfortunately, in my family, we're having legal problems with one particular family member. It started in May and June. We're sort of on the defensive side of that. We're protecting ourselves. We're defending ourselves against it. It's all house-related, and unfortunately, it's still going on when I haven't even really necessarily gotten my father's ashes back yet. And so that sort of re-triggered something. So coming back now to restart the podcast, I thought, I'm in a much better place to do that. I want to take advantage of these real life issues that are going on, not to bash anybody, not to throw my stuff on anyone else, but to sort of show how even those of us who are the most prepared, the most aware, the most people think we're so put together and we're so ahead of things, and many of us are, right, Lisa? It still doesn't matter. When these things come up, and they come up together like that, you really need to make sure that not only your physical health is taken care of, but that also your mental health is taken care of. And this is a clear example of why it's important to make sure that you're taking care of your mental health before things like this come up. So right now, I think I've turned the corner a little bit, but there are some things that I have to deal with, regular grief, with what is it that they call it? Cumulative grief, ambiguous grief. And we'll do some episodes on what those things are. And in working with my grief counselor, I'm really understanding a lot of that and how it shows up and all of that. Good days and bad days. So that's what we're here to talk about. I wanted to, in full disclosure to everyone, let them know that's what's been going on. And that, we're now moving forward trying to rebuild and get things together. And I am going to serve as a model, I guess, or as an example of how you do it. You take the good and the bad and how you do it and what works and what doesn't. And it's different for everyone, right, Lisa?
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely. And with you, as a therapist, dealing with other people's grief, and then having to deal with your own grief at the same time, it's almost impossible to do.
It's really hard. And, that's a good point to bring up, because then what do we do ethically, right?
Right.
Remember, I had a conversation with Lisa in the beginning of all this, and I said, what do I do? Do I just not go to work? Do I not show up? Do I tell them? Do I not tell? We had
in the beginning, you definitely needed to not go to work because you wouldn't have been effective as a therapist.
And I think it would have been a bad example to show them.
Right.
And not taking care of yourself, right?
Right, absolutely.
So I did do that. And then I came back just slowly, little. And I'm still slowly. I don't even have a full load or anything like that. I'm doing what I can, and I'm honest with some of my clients. I decide which ones are in an okay place to kind of let them know what's going on so that they're aware and they can make choices that make sense to them. But so far, I find that it's actually been healing to do work. You were right about that.
Right. There is a point where you have to go back because then you're just sitting and all you're doing is you need to grieve and move forward a little bit.
Yeah, and so that's been, but I know I'm being very mindful of my limits in that area. So there's that. So I'm going to turn it over to you if you want to talk about your practice a little bit, because I'm excited about that.
Well, okay. I'll talk a little bit about my practice. I've gone into private practice, Green Heart Counseling. Yay.
Yeah.
I work with adults, 18 and older, anxiety, depression, grief, as we've just been talking about, trauma. I also provide marriage counseling, which is very interesting.
Nice. Yes. That's interesting.
I didn't know that I would I mean, I knew I had the skills for all of that, and we've had the education and the training and all of that, but I didn't realize that would be so dynamic working with couples. But so provide that over there. I'm on. Do I plug the whole address and everything?
Yes, and it's definitely going to be in our show notes, and it's going to be a big part of what we do here because we do have, we have another nonprofit that I'm working on. Hopefully, again, launching. But it's sort of a collective on mental health, private practices and people who deliver services individually here. And that is part of it. She's part of it. So I definitely... And then also, the big thing that I love about what you do is that, I'm really big on diversity. I'm really big on multiculturalism. I'm really big on integration and all of those things. And I'm the rare sort of person around here with that. And I mean, we are saturated here in Somerville now with a whole lot of, but that's the one thing that I know, for me anyway, that's just my niche and what it's innate in me to do and what I have passion for. And then Lisa is really a multicultural provider, and we don't have a whole lot of them. And that's important, and we'll have many a podcast on why that's important, and it's significant, and it's still inclusive. She sees everybody. She does
absolutely. I get the phone calls where you can tell they're trying to weed it out. Like they want to ask,
can I still come?
Can I still come? Absolutely. It's multicultural, inclusive of everybody.
Everybody's welcome. And the reason that the word multicultural is important is because there are a lot of communities that really are sort of out, on the edge, not knowing where they all fit in. And the truth is that our profession doesn't do a great job at training us to give appropriate mental health services to people who come from people who are other, and people who are different. And it just sort of doesn't work that way. And we've become, our generation has become little radicals on making sure.
Because, you don't have to be from the same background to properly treat someone. But when you see yourself in the person that you're seeking help from, it really
makes a big difference.
It makes a big difference.
It also helps with like if you're coming in, like, okay, as a Latina, if I'm coming in with specific issues that the dynamics within my culture really has, like matriarchy, has a really big impact on me. And I'm going in to see a provider who really does not understand at all the cultural implications of that and my struggles and all that, then that means that I have to tell that story all over again. And I have to help you understand, the ins and outs of it. And then even then, it's not fair to have someone understand that if they're from a different culture or a different experience. Right. So if you have someone who's also a Latina, it's not because, hey, man, you're my people, and that's the only one that can.
It's just something that they already understand it.
They understand it. They get it. It's lived experience, like I put on my website. And it takes the burden off of the client of having to teach you about them. It takes that burden, it takes that heaviness, it takes that discomfort off of them. Right. When you get them without. It doesn't mean that you cannot, that you have to be
right. It's Latina. Just similar to like my husband was in the military, 24 years in the Air Force. That's lived experience. So someone comes to me, I have a military spouse in front of me, and she's going through this and that, and she wants to know how to handle it. You don't have to explain that to me. I get that.
We get it. We
can just get to work.
Yeah. And it takes the burden off of your client from having to tell you why it feels the way it does and how it. I mean, it's just it's helpful. And it's unfortunately being a minority, that's what we deal with. So less of that we have to deal with systemically, because all counselors are wonderful, and then we have some shitheads, just like anywhere else.
We won't say names.
We won't say names, but just like anywhere else, any other profession. But we are few and far between that can claim that. So that's why Lisa is important. She's multicultural and all that. But so we'll have in the show notes, we'll have her website and her contact info and all that. So if anybody wants to check her out, they can check her out. But you can also find her through our podcast, because she's a regular little co-host here. So now we're going to introduce J-Rock. J-Rock.
Hey.
J-Rock does a lot of our supervision with our technical stuff here, but he also just knows all about podcasts and stuff.
I don't know.
Radio.
I know a little bit here and there, but, dip and dabble. I dip and dabble.
He does. And he has a lot of different little projects that he works on, not necessarily mental health. So as you can see, we don't need to have mental health people. Just all of it. We can have the J-Rocks helping us out.
You know what though? It's always fun to, and educational, because hearing from the podcast, from your previous episodes, it's like so much that I learned that I'm like, oh man, like I think I might need some therapy. It's like,
Well, Green Heart Counseling.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Really good.
I'm saying, I'm like, just learning a lot about mental health. Obviously, like you were saying, like mental health is a big, definitely more in pop culture now. Like it's more of a, I guess, acceptable term with a lot of people. That
it's not so scary anymore.
Right. And yeah, I'm just from that ilk of the Black community where it's like, all right, you going to therapy? Like what's going on?
You must be crazy.
You must be a little crazy and stuff. And it's like, I don't know.
Necessarily not.
So it's like a question mark. I don't know. Maybe I'm just open to it. But.
And the thing to know too, right, Lisa? The thing to know about mental health is like you don't have to be having a mental health crisis to go seek counseling and or therapy. You really don't. Yeah. You don't need to be having some big major problem. It's good if you're having big major issues.
Yeah.
But you don't have to. Sometimes we just need to go and sort of find clarity, find ourselves, get some professional guiding lights, some people who really don't have a dog in the fight, like our friends and family do, because our friends and family, bless their heart, right? Like they say in the South, they look out for us, they want to encourage us, they want to, do all of those things for us, but a lot of the times is to our detriment.
Right.
Yeah. You have people giving you advice that just suck. And they think that they know what the hell they're talking about. They think that they understand. They think that they're telling you the right thing. And all it's really doing is causing you to implode more and to have your relationships go to hell even more. Yeah. And that's part of what's going on in my family, and it's uncomfortable and it's horrible, but people have to come to that on their own. They have to realize that perhaps a professional is who I need to speak to, because they are the unbiased, trained, licensed people who know.
Right. And there's sometimes that you can't tell your family what you're actually going through. It might be about them.
It might be about them. And you don't want them to think that you hate them or anything. You just need to work some stuff out. Or things that you don't even know. Like if you had some kind of experience or some job. I do a lot of women and women-identified clients, and I have a lot of at work once a long time ago, this happened to me, and it didn't occur to me that it's a trauma, or that it was an assault, or that it was a oppressive incident, or that it had to do with my gender. And I didn't realize how much it affected me until now that I'm in my 40s or something, whatever. Yep. And I need to process and think that doesn't mean that this person needs therapy for the rest of their life or anything like that. Yeah. They just need to go sort of work some things out. So, and then some of it is you do need therapy. Some of it is you've been struggling with clinical depression or clinical anxiety your entire life, and it doesn't work anymore the way that you've been coping, it doesn't. Sometimes it's cumulative, like what happens with police officers. They get cumulative PTSD, and it's insidious and slow, and you don't recognize it until the very, very, very end. And suddenly it's there, but they don't recognize it as that. And the people around them don't recognize it as that. Yeah. You do, right? And you want them to go seek help, but they didn't, because they didn't think, those stressors or whatever was impacting their personal life. But it happens. So, and maybe they need to go for that specifically. We don't know. Marriage is breaking out, and what we were just talking about with what was going on with myself, it's like, if I said I don't need therapy and counseling right now, I'm a big fat fucking liar. That's just bullshit. You don't go through those sorts of losses and stressors and traumas and grieving and all that and not need more than just your sister, your brother, your cousin, your wife. Right. You need a professional that's going to counsel you, and then they decide if you need therapy or not after the counsel, right? I'm really big on that. I get hot about that.
Yeah, no, it's and that's why I say it's just learning so much from you and Lisa and Victoria. And it's just like, oh man, like, because I just know, like, growing up, like, my dad had, just tough love on me. And it was, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, was that, because I don't know if I'm displaying that to other people. So I'm trying to be cognizant of, all right, well, let me make sure I'm not doing that. But then again, and kind of like slips back into habits of what you've known.
That's what you know.
Yeah. So I'm like, I don't know. So now I'm like,
you're questioning.
I'm questioning everything.
The fact that you're being mindful about it, you are already
I just
doing the work.
I just know I had to unlearn a lot of stuff. I just recently, like the past maybe 15 years of stuff that I've thought. And it's like, okay, now there's so much information out now, and like you're hearing more voices speak from different perspectives, different experiences, to where I'm like, oh, okay, all right, I didn't know this was wrong. I didn't know this was a trigger. And I'm like, and then when I think about it, I'm like, duh. I'm like, okay,
that makes sense. And especially when you hear it in non-therapeutic, non-jargon language, right? Like you just hear therapists telling you.
You're like, what?
Hey, man, this is what
acronym after like, wait a minute, what does all that mean?
Yeah, and it makes sense. And I think 2 points that I hear when you're talking, 2 things that come to mind is how gender roles are so insidious in everything that goes on. So with me, obviously, I do the non-binary LGBT women focused kind of thing. There's a whole lot of gender stuff that goes on that gets sort of conflated with mental health issues, with therapeutic type issues, with all behavioral issues, with just everyday stuff. For men in particular, like I wish there were more men specialist mental health people.
Do you know how much that is needed?
Oh my God.
My gosh.
I mean, not that we can't rock it, because we can, but
can. Absolutely.
But that's not, it's like we were saying before, there are things we don't fucking know. And if we know, we have that implicit bias, right?
Man, my therapist is my barber.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Yeah.
Like that's that stereotype of like, you go to a barbershop and the barber cuts your hair, but they're also your therapist, your lawyer, your guidance counselor. Like my barber.
He might not want to be your lawyer though.
That's true. That's true. But like he might know somebody, he got clients, I'm gonna put you on to this person.
Because everybody's a coach now.
Yeah, so I'm like, okay, the advice I'm getting from him, I'm like, all right, cool.
Yeah.
All right, I
but they
get
know
it.
some stuff.
They know some stuff.
They're wise. They're wise. It used to be, listen, way before this profession even existed, right? There were the philosophers in the world, right? And life was simple, right? Because you had the village and whatever, and you had like the one philosopher guy, and you had your spiritual person, all that. And the philosopher was really the person who did a lot of this sort of work before it turned into a mental health crisis. They were those people. Then, psychiatrists came along, then psychologists came along, then social workers came along, and then clinical mental health counselors that Lisa and I are. So it's sort of like removed the philosophy from it. But really, that's at the forefront. That knowledge, that wisdom is part of the forefront. But like for men, I think what J-Rock was saying is that listening to, by the way, shout out to Victoria, who he mentioned.
That's right.
We love you, Victoria, and we miss you, and you shall be our special guest co-host eventually, now that we're getting back up.
That's right.
But him listening to myself and Lisa and everything, and even some of his little other podcast crew members listen to us, and they're like, damn, all right, because we break it down to simple terms, and we make it make sense to your everyday life. Like, you don't have to be in a mental health crisis to know that you should probably go talk to somebody about this, or maybe just get some extra support or whatever. But for men, I feel, especially men of color, like Latino men, black men, men from other cultures that are not necessarily white, and I mean that with all the respect in the world. It is a different reality. It is a different life experience, and like you mentioned with your dad and what was modeled, and where did that come from, and how come, and the history involved in that. A lot of us don't even learn that in school, much less do we even ask about it, where's the conversation in that. So for you to be able to have someone that you don't have to spend most of your time explaining that to. You just can explain to them, I'm feeling this kind of way, and I don't even know what's up with that. They'll be able to help you a lot faster than someone who doesn't.
I believe it. Yeah.
So I love it that you said that, right, Lisa? Because that's the whole point, is that one of the reasons why we wanted to do this podcast is because I know I would listen to podcasts. Yeah. And I wanted to hear the subject because I was so interested in the subjects, but I couldn't tolerate feeling like I was in like a class, like it was a class, but not even a fun class. It was just a very dry.
Yeah, because even we understand the acronyms, but I don't want to hear that.
Yeah, like there's that. And then it's like they're teaching you as opposed to talking to you about it. And then it wasn't relatable, even to me. Like, it just wasn't relatable.
But I didn't realize that J-Rock was actually listening to the podcast and gaining information.
Yeah, 100%.
His whole little podcast crew does.
Yeah,
I'm telling you.
Yeah, taking notes, everything. We bring it up.
They do, and it's good because, I mean, they learn a lot from it. And I learn a lot from people, too. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's really important. So one of the things, Lisa and I have a lot of different... When Lisa and Aries come back from their little vacation that they're about to take, we are going to start recording weekly. They're going to be gone, like 2 weeks?
Yeah.
And then they'll be back. And then I'm going to try to record some things in between. But Lisa and I have like some ideas of things we want to do. We want to do hot topics.
Yeah.
We want to do videos, like just quick little reels and videos on things that go on and that come up that really need addressing from like a very matter-of-fact, real perspective, as opposed to some of the stuff that you see in the media or online. Be careful with TikTok, people, okay? Mm-hmm. TikTok is not your therapist, right? I mean, and even some therapists, I have to look at them sideways sometimes when I see them doing this online.
I do follow a clinical psychologist and... Excuse me, she's a clinical psychiatrist.
Yeah.
She's really good. I'll tell you about her.
No, that's good. I've got a bunch that I follow that I think are very responsible, very good, very all those things. But then there are some that you have to wonder, what are they trying to get, like followings? And they come up with the 5 things. If your husband is these 5 things and he's a narcissistic whatever, that's not how that works. Like, you're going to have everybody thinking their husband is narcissistic because everybody's husband does this on some level. And now everybody wants to divorce their husband, right? Because somebody on TikTok or Instagram
remember,
or whatever
provides marriage counseling.
Yeah, so. Contact them. They know. Just be careful with that. It might sound like it applies. It might sound like it makes sense to your situation, but that person on their reel, on their 2-second whatever, and Lisa and I are going to be very responsible with this because we don't know your history. We're not your person who's been listening, who understands, who's done an assessment, who gets your history, who knows your culture, who knows everything in order to come up with that sort of impression, with the diagnostic, with the maybe you have it's complicated. You cannot just diagnose a person because they have like one strong trait in that thing. So be careful with the online stuff. But on the other hand, it's really good because people are talking and people are losing the stigma and there's voices being heard that they didn't have before. And it gets people to question. But it's a thin line. Sometimes it just runs and no matter what, the internet is not your therapist. It is not your therapist or your counselor, okay? Always, always, always check with a professional, licensed counselor.
Yeah.
Okay? Those are the ones you want to talk to. Make sure they're licensed. Make sure they're credentialed. They didn't just hang up a shingle and call themselves, a coach? You knew that was coming.
Yeah.
Or, a counselor. They are, and, like Lisa knows, there's a lot we have to do. Continuing education. Things change, right? Yeah. We have to do that. We have to do, we have to have our license renewed every year. There's a lot of shit that we can't get away with that so-called hang up your shingle people can. So.
Hang up your shingle.
Yeah, no, don't do that. No. All right. So in closing, it feels good to be back. Thank you guys for backing me up and come in. Like I said, in about 2 weeks, we're going to start having the actual topics and preparing and talking about those kind of things. We're going to start working on the hot topics. We're going to start working on the, immediate, social justice and social change issues that come up that affect our mental health. And we'll still be talking a little personally about it. I am going to talk a little bit more about ambiguous grief, cumulative grief, and all of that as we move forward, because it's a real, real, real part of my life right now.
Yeah.
And I need to be transparent about that and hopefully help some people out there that are dealing with some of these things. Okay? Yep. All right. So we're going to close now. Unless you guys have anything else to say. Thank you for listening.
All right. I'm excited.
Me too.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Yay. Bye, guys. See you next week.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Studio Talk podcast with me, the creator and host, Xiomara Sosa. We hope you enjoyed our conversation about all things related to mental health. You can check out our show notes for reference, resources, and other show-related information. If you found value in our conversation, we encourage you to join us weekly as we discuss different mental health topics. You can head over to Studio Talk Podcast's website at studiotalkpodcast.net and send us a message from there, as well as sign up for our newsletter. Our email address is studiotalkmentalhealth@gmail.com. You can subscribe to our podcast and leave us a rating and review at blueberry.com Studio Talk Mental Health. You can also text or call us at area code 843-695-9974. Please recommend our podcast to your friends, colleagues, family, and networks. That's all for this episode. See you all next time.